All right, we are in the middle of chapter 52. Let me remind you where we're up to, and we're beginning a very interesting concept today. We said that the godliness of creation is throughout all of creation in such an intense manner that creation can't read it, perceive it, benefit from it at all. And then that godliness, just like in our body, our soul has its first level constriction enough to be read by our brain, and then from there, a much, much more intense constriction to be diffused throughout the body. So in creation, this is mirroring creation. In creation, God is first, again, completely intense, completely unreadable. And then there's a tremendous constriction until God can be expressed in God's brain, so to speak, in his faculties of will and wisdom. In the Ratzon, the will, which is the lower dimension of the crown, Keser, and in the Chachma, Bina, and Das, the three faculties of intellect, the seminal wisdom, the understanding, the connectivity. In those four elements, the brain, so to speak, the intellect, so to speak, of God, that is the first manifestation of God in creation in a fashion that it can be read, it can be absorbed, it can be perceived, it can benefit, it can be expressed. But then, now this gets more complex than in our body, because obviously our soul is much smaller than God. So by us, it's very simple. The soul constricts to the brain, and then from the brain constricts further and spreads to the whole body. By God and creation, it's not so simple, because God's so powerful. Creation's creation, God's God. How in the world does God relate to creation? We're not talking about physicality. We're talking about any spiritual dimension. How is God able to relate to creation that creation can absorb and not lose itself? So we're saying, well, the first manifestation of God that can be absorbed is in the intellect, because just like by us, the intellect is the most godlike, the most sublime. That faculty of chachma, of seminal wisdom, is so transparent to God, has so little sense of self that God can be expressed there. But that's very, very intense and very, very high. So if God from that point would directly descend to the rest of creation, no way, completely would blow away all of creation. In other words, by us, that's what happens. Our soul constricts itself till it can be expressed in our brain. And then from our brain, it constricts further and expressed to each part of the body, the eye to see, the ear to hear, as we've discussed. So now God is in his brain, his intellect, and from there, if it was just exactly like us, the constriction would go further and it would be expressed to every element of creation. No, does not happen by God. Way too intense, way too much power, cannot directly be expressed from this point of tremendous constriction that it is now perceivable in the will and wisdom. Still way too high, still would blow away creation. Creation would not be. So God then takes this self that he has constricted to the level of will and wisdom, the lower dimension of the crown, will, and the three faculties of intellect, Chachma, Bina, Das, seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity, and all of that becomes embedded in his 10th and final dimension, what we call Sphira. We talk here in the world of Atzilus, the highest world, the world of being. All of this will and wisdom expression of God now comes indwelling in the 10th and final dimension called sovereignty, Malchus. So God, as he's expressed in will and wisdom, embeds itself all the way, that's from the top, the highest level of the palace, right? Remember our metaphor of the palace with the 10 floors? These are the highest floors of the palace. Whoop, take the elevator, go all the way down to the lowest dimension, Malchus, sovereignty, the 10th and final level, embedded in there. So it's like this intense God energy of will and wisdom now through the filter of sovereignty. From here, it can filter out and be diffused even more small for creation to receive it. Actually, as we're going to learn today, not exactly. It still needs another layer. But as far as we learned until now, that's what we said. Again, first layer, God in his intensity in all of creation, and nothing can read him. Second layer, this intensity becomes constricted until it can be expressed in the will and wisdom, the four faculties of will, seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity. Still way too intense. That becomes embedded, descends. Remember, like the idea of Shechina, the indwelling, descends to actually the lowest level, sovereignty, and the will and wisdom filtering through sovereignty is now ready, but still needs another layer to be expressed and give creation its visible, perceivable, able to be absorbed and do something with it, God energy. That's exactly what we're up to. So the last thing we were doing inside was reading different names for this 10th dimension, which Kabbalistically and in the language of Hasidus we call Malchus, sovereignty, for many reasons. It's God's sovereignty. It's how he rules, because a king rules by speech, and sovereignty is the speech of God. Sovereignty is where creation takes place, because sovereignty is God's speech. And God speaks, and it is. All of creation is God's speech, right? There's a 10 creative utterances. If you look in the very first chapter of Genesis, the first verse, generally erroneously translated in the beginning, actually meaning for the sake of the first, God created heaven and earth. That's the first of the 10 utterances. And then 9 more times in the chapter we have, and God said, let there be, and God said, let there be, and God said, let there be. Those are the 10 utterances, speech, which causes all creation, not just in our physical reality, in all reality. So God creates by speech. Speech is in his 10th dimension of sovereignty. So sovereignty is his power of creation, his power of speech, his power of sovereignty, of being king, because now there's something to be king over. So this is the appropriate medium where the God as expressed in will and wisdom way beyond anything creation can handle can come into sovereignty, which is the faculty of creation, and the light can filter through it and then be, of course, more constricted and diffused to creation. So we gave 4 names for this dimension. Again, Kabbalistically, in the language of Hasidus, we call it Malchus, sovereignty. But we gave Alma Discalia, the world of revelation, Matrinusa, Aramaic for the queen, Ema Tata, the lower mother, and Shechina, for the indwelling of God's presence. We explained them all at the very end of last week, and now, exactly where we're holding in the Tanya, the Rebbe, in very few cryptic words, is going to explain the reason for each name and how it relates to this faculty of being the vehicle through which God's energy can flow to creation. 8 lines from the bottom of page 144 of chapter 52, Perek Beis. Actually, let's just even go up 1 line over just to have us read the 4 names, because now the Rebbe, in very few words, is going to very cryptically explain each of the names. Alma Discalia. This energy from where the will and wisdom, remember the will and wisdom which were actually packaged in Torah and her commandments. That was a beautiful bombshell we learned last week, that Torah and the commandments are the energy of God's first expression to creation. So this will and wisdom, as it's expressed in Torah and mitzvos, descends now to Malchus, to sovereignty, which has, as we're saying here, 4 names. Alma Discalia, the worlds of revelation, as versus all other worlds higher, which are called Alma Discasia, the world of concealment. Mitrinusa, the queen. Ve'ema Tata, the lower mother. V'Shechina. And Shechina, all the other 3, the first 3 are all Kabbalistic terms. The 4th is a term the Talmud also uses for Malchus. Shechina, the indwelling of God, like shochen, to dwell, because we have here this intensity of God's expression. The will and 3 faculties of wisdom, as they are packaged in Torah and her commandments, descend to be dwelling within Malchus. So there's this much, much higher energy. The will and wisdom, as it's expressed in Torah mitzvahs, descends to a much, much lower realm. We're talking about the height of the palace, castle, the highest floor, going all the way down to the lowest floor. Will is even beyond the floors, and then the first 3 floors are the 3 faculties of intellect. So the highest floors are going all the way down to the bottom of the castle, the lowest floor of the palace. Sovereignty. So it's a Shekhinah, it's a dwelling, an indwelling of this higher energy into this lower dimension to vivify. So that the light of God, as GPS signal lost. My phone's been doing that all day, sorry. So this much, much higher energy, the first revelation of God in creation, in will and wisdom, is now descending into sovereignty to dwell there and be the core energy, which will then filter out through the filter of sovereignty, through this much more constricted dimension of sovereignty, to be able to be experienced by creation. So creation can benefit from God's energy. Shechina, as we know, is from the word our parsha, the Torah portion of this week, Truma, Vasuli Mikdash, V'shachanti b'socham. I will dwell in them. God's higher dimension comes down to dwell in this lower reality. So this source is the beginning of the revelation of the infinite light of God. That is the reason, very cryptically, the Rebbe gives for why this dimension, this 10th dimension, Malchus sovereignty, is called Alma Diskalia. Why is it called the world of revelation? Why are all the higher worlds called the worlds of concealment? Because in all of them there is concealment. In all of them God is not revealed. Well, God's revealed in his will and wisdom. True, but not in a fashion anyone can perceive. Anyone doesn't mean me. Anyone doesn't mean you. Anyone doesn't mean physicality. The highest celestial beings cannot get God straight from his will and wisdom. So even though will and wisdom is the first point of revelation, but it's only revelation on the level of will and wisdom. Meaning, higher than will and wisdom, there was no revelation at all. God was completely, exactly the same, absolute intensity, and nothing could absorb. There was no revelation. Nothing was benefiting. Nothing was absorbing. So then there's tremendous constriction to be experienced in will and wisdom, because in the levels of will and wisdom that are so sublime, are so high, are so transparent to God, they can absorb God in will and wisdom, but nothing else can. So it's still not called the worlds of revelation because nothing else can benefit. There's no worlds, there's no creation that can absorb God as he is pseudo-revealed in will and wisdom, but not really revealed, because not revealed for anything lower than will and wisdom. So Malchus sovereignty is called the worlds of revelation because now there's revelation. Now creation, all of the myriads of celestial creations, plus us of course, can receive, can read this, can absorb this energy. That's why she's called the worlds of revelation. Now revelation starts to the worlds. That she draws down and illuminates to the worlds in a fashion of revelation. This is explaining the word queen. Why is Malchus sovereignty called a queen? Because we're told through the queen we know the will of the king. Envisioning the king as remote, beyond, totally unreachable. But the king talks to the queen, and the queen talks to the rest of us. So Malchus sovereignty is called the queen because she's now the transfer of the king, of God, to the rest of creation. We can draw down now through the queen. We're going to understand what the king wants. And from this source is drawn down for each aspect of creation the light and vitality specifically worthy for them, which is why sovereignty is called the lower mother. The mother, of course, we understand that term. That's the creator. That's the nurturer. That's the one who raises and loves and allows that child to flourish. That's Malchus. Again, God, beyond all of creation, within all of creation, beyond all of creation, no one's gaining, no one's benefiting, no children are happening. God then squashes himself to will and wisdom, and still no children are happening. Because yes, now he is squashed. Now there's revelation, sort of, a little bit, on the level of will and wisdom. But nothing else besides will and wisdom can benefit. Well, will and wisdom is packaged in Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, but nothing can read Torah mitzvahs either on that level. Meaning, yes, it's Torah mitzvahs, but it's not Torah mitzvahs that can be read and perceived by any creation. It's way too high, way too intense, unbearable in a sense. Meaning the intensity is so strong, if anything directly received, they would cease to exist. So it's not a mother. There's no nurturance. It should be like burn you up from the intensity. So that's not a mother. But now, when that energy of will and wisdom descends enormously. Again, will and wisdom as packaged in Torah mitzvahs descends enormously to go to that lowest floor of the palace, to go to Malchus, and to be filtered through the prism, through the filter, through the constrictions of Malchus, of sovereignty. Now there's a mother. Because we have the energy of creation, God's will and wisdom, first revelation of God.
GPS signal lost.
We have the energy, but that energy is bearable. It's more than bearable. That energy is now nurturing. It's giving. It's coming to us in a fashion that it's a mother. that creation exists. So that's why Malchus, why sovereignty, is called the lower mother. Again, we said lower because there's a higher mother of understanding, of Bina. But again, that's way beyond what creation is directly getting from. This is a level creation's getting from. What the Rebbe just did, again, very cryptically, he gave us 4 names for sovereignty. For Malchus, worlds of revelation, queen, lower mother, Shechina, the indwelling of the divine presence. He just now, very cryptically, explained, but he explained every one of them. Worlds of revelation, here actually begins revelation. Here there can be a world that can perceive the revelation. The queen, she's conveying the will of the king. The lower mother, she's the mother. The energy now can be a flow that nurtures, that loves, that supports, that sustains. And continuing, of course, we're now going to explain Shechina. V'shochen u'mislabesh b'sochon lahachayosam. And Shechina, Shochen, the indwelling, that higher energy that comes down to a lower dimension to vivify it. She is indwelling and being engarbed in them to give them life, which of course is exactly what's happening here, because we have this will and wisdom, intense high level, that Shochen, that comes down, that descends, that's within, implanted within sovereignty. And now from here, life can go to all of creation. Because this higher dimension has come into a lower dimension. And now this itself, this package of will and wisdom as it's engarbed in Torah mitzvos within sovereignty, now this becomes the power of Shekhinah that descends into all the lower dimensions and gives them life. So that is God in creation. And this is not only true for creation, this is also true for the souls. This is how all the souls are vivified. Someone just asked me a question on text. So the question is, so what someone just asked, which is a great question, is why are we saying there are 10 spheros, 10 divine expressions? We have the crown, higher than the 10, and then we have the 3 intellectual, and then we have, however you want to construct it, 6, or we could say 7 emotional. Now we are saying that will, seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity, Kesser, the lower development, the lower level of Kesser, Chachma Bina Das, embeds itself in sovereignty. We skipped the 6 emotions in between. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod. We skipped them because this is not the process of godliness flowing level by level in creation. That's not actually at all what's happening here. This precedes that. It's a little hard to understand because we already know the structure. We know this thing as it's already put together. Now we're saying what happened originally? What happened primordially? What happened for it to be? The Rebbe is telling us like intense secrets here. So as the vision is, and it's it's very counterintuitive. Envision a hollow space, as if there's a house, okay? A house, beautiful house, furnishings, carpets, paint, pictures, HVAC system, all the things of the house. So you know the house. Now, zap. Everything gets stripped away, and all you see is actually that initial structure that all this was built under, meaning you see literally the pipes, the metal structure underneath all those layers of concrete and whatever else, plaster and all that. It's all stripped away. You just see literally what they call the studs, the metal frame. So it's a metal frame and a lot of empty space. So we're used to looking at creation like the home with all the decorations, with all the furniture, like after it already happened, so to speak. We're now going back and saying, but how does it happen? So originally there's like these studs, just the bare structural metal pieces, piping. I'm sorry, I'm not using the correct terms, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Just like literally the metal, literally the studs, literally the pipes that everything will be put on top of. And from there, from that very raw, empty structure, just the pipes, God first expresses himself in the highest piping, will and intellect. And then that energy does not flow through all the other pipes. No, it's not what happens actually. It doesn't. That's the energy. That's the core. That's God. That's as he is himself expressed through Torah mitzvahs. But guess what? It can't flow. It's too intense. So that package deal then jumps down to the lowest piping, all the way in the basement, to the lowest level, to Malchus, to be embedded in that empty pipe of Malchus. So now you have all this godliness. Remember, it's 10 empty pipes. But then there's all that beautiful shining energy there, but it's way too shining. It's way too intense. That whole way too intense package invests itself in the lowest pipe. And now there's a lot of obscuring on that energy because that lowest pipe is very thick, right? It's the lowest one. It's on the bottom. It's very thick. So all that energy went straight into Malchus, went straight into the lowest one. So I could see some glimmerings through the cracks of that lowest pipe. That's about what creation can handle. And from the glimmering energy, now it flows to the whole structure. And now suddenly there's plaster, there's concrete, there's drywall, there's paint, there's flooring, there's ceiling, there's carpeting, there's everything that we know of as creation, all can come because of this light of the will and wisdom flowing through that very obscuring pipe of Malchus, of sovereignty, can now filter to all of creation, and creation can be. I don't know if my story made it clearer or more confusing, but that's the answer. That's the reason. So the Rebbe has explained this to us in terms of creation. The Rebbe says, by the way, it's also the same for souls. The souls also are going through this. They also are receiving from the will and wisdom as it's within sovereignty. Meaning, we know, we learned this in chapter 2 of Tanya, and many times since probably, that the souls come from the highest level of God. Within the worlds that we discussed in Tanya, means Chachma, seminal wisdom, in the highest world, the world of Atzilus. So the souls are in seminal wisdom, in Chachma. Remember the highest floor of the first palace. Of course, we explained there are many rooms and tables and chairs on that highest floor, about 90. So there's varying options where those souls will emerge. But the highest floor in the highest palace, seminal wisdom of Atzilus, of the world of being. That's where all the souls are. But again, it's too high there. Creation can't happen there. The souls are there, but they can't be expressed and revealed at. So again, that energy has to come down to Malchus, has to come down to the lowest plane. That's why we speak of the souls from Chachma Vatzilus, seminal wisdom from the world of being, and we speak of the repository of the souls in Malchus, in the lowest level of that world. Not the highest floor, not number 10, number 1, the bottom, first floor. All the way on the bottom. I thought the souls were seminal wisdom all the way on the top. They are! But it's too high there for revelation. So just like in general, God's energy as it's engarbed in Torah and Mitzvahs comes down to Malchus to filter through and now fill all the worlds, also the soul energy. It's up there in seminal wisdom. It's revelation, but just revelation that seminal wisdom can appreciate it. Has to come down into sovereignty, has to come down into Malchus. As the Rebbe continues and explains, and that's why sovereignty is called something else. She's called the mother of the children, al derech mashal, so to speak. V'Knesses Yisrael. She's called Knesses Yisrael, the repository of the souls of the Jewish people. We've learned earlier in Tanya this concept. We discussed it once in terms of, I don't know if anyone remembers this very beautiful idea that we discussed actually in chapter 41 of Tanya, that you can do a mitzvah, you could do a commandment, and you could dedicate it to the Jewish people. You could say, this isn't for me personally, this is for every Jew in the world. And we said, what happens then? Well, your mitzvah, your commandment's energy rises to Malchus of Atzilus, this level we're discussing, sovereignty of the highest world, because there is Knesses Yisrael, there is the repository of all the souls, and then it affects all the souls, and then it trickles down from the source of the souls to come down to the souls and bodies in this world. So Knesses Yisrael, the repository of the souls, is in Malchus. You're like, wait a minute, the souls aren't in Malchus, the souls are in Chachma V'Tzilus. That's what it says clearly in Tanya. All the souls come from Chachma V'Tzilus, from the highest world, the highest plane of the highest world, seminal wisdom. They do, but it's too high there. There's no revelation there. There's no nurturing there. It's too intense. So just like creation in general, so too the souls. Yes, the souls are emerging in seminal wisdom, the highest level, the highest world. And from there, again, not directly, embedded, Shechina, indwelling, it goes straight down to Malchus, where there, now that's called Eim Habanim. the mother of the children being the souls. That's called Knesset Yisrael, the repository of all the souls, because that's where all the souls are found. Yes, they emerged in seminal wisdom, but that's too high to deal with, so to speak. So they descend straight from seminal wisdom. They're not going through all the world. Straight, the elevator goes straight down. We're not detouring through all the other floors. Straight down to Malchus, straight down to sovereignty. Here, again, world of revelation, queen, lower mother. Here, it's constricted enough that there can be revelation, there can be nurturance, there can be growth, there can be this flow, there can be God's speech. Here is where the souls are found. Any questions on any of this? Okay, so now the Rebbe continues and says, from this source emerge the souls of Atzilus, and then we're created. Atzilus is a higher world, so it's just emerged. In Bria already, it's a lower world. It's actually a creation, the souls of Bria, etc. And all this is just an expression, a diffusing of this light of God as he is in will, in wisdom, packaged in Torah and the commandments that are embedded in Malchus and sovereignty, and from there diffused to all of creation. And this light that extends from Malchus, really the light of God as it is in will and wisdom and Torah and mitzvahs, but it's embedded in Malchus because it's too high up there, that light is what we call Shekhinah. Because that light now, in other words, there's like a double level of Shekhinah going on here. The will and wisdom are the Shekhinah for Malchus. Shekhinah, we said, means a higher level that descends to be embedded to vivify a lower level. So God's will and wisdom are embedded in Malchus. So that's a Shekhinah for Malchus. And then this whole package deal, God's will and wisdom within Torah mitzvahs embedded in Malchus. Now this is the Shekhinah. Through the filter of Malchus, this whole package is the Shekhinah to descend to all the lower worlds. To vivify the world of Bria, to vivify the world of Yetzirah, to vivify the world of Asiya. All of these, for all of these lower dimensions, this is the Shekhinah. This is the higher energy. Malchus containing the will and wisdom of Torah and mitzvahs, now that's the Shekhinah to vivify every other dimension of creation. So within Malchus, God's will and wisdom, as in Garden Torah mitzvahs, is the Shekhinah, and that within Malchus is the Shekhinah for all of creation. Is that higher level that flows to be the source of life, the vitality of every lower level. Light, the light that extends from the sun. We love that metaphor. Chassidus uses it all the time. If you want to explore it more, learn Shar Chayicha Ve'Emunah, which delves into it at length. So we have the sun, 92 million miles away, and we have the rays. By planet sun, you can't see the rays. They're totally nullified. But as we get further from the sun, the rays can more be beings themselves. So we have the first expression of God that the world can handle within the will and wisdom, within Torah mitzvahs, descending being the Shekhinah for Malchus, for sovereignty. And now that is the Shekhinah, and the light flows through Malchus like the rays of the sun. Really, the sun is all the way up there in will and wisdom. Forget it. We'd be totally burnt up there. Now the light can flow through the filter of Malchus, and creation can be warmed by the glow. Creation can happen. Aval hashchina atzma. But we got a problem. I think I'm going to explain the problem before I read it, and then I'll explain the solution to the problem. Problem you'll understand very quickly. We are saying, right? So everything here, I'm assuming, is totally clear because there wasn't many questions. Good. So now we're going to take the next level. God wants to relate to creation. God wants creation, so he has to be able to relate to creation. In himself, in his essence and being, he would just blow away creation. Nothing to talk about. There would be no creation. So God needs to, right, suck himself in, conceal himself by many layers for a little light of self to diffuse, tiny, tiny, tiny drop that, this creation can handle. Now we have creation. He first just expressed himself through all creation and nothing could read him at all. So then he squashed himself into will and wisdom could read him, but nothing else. And then will and wisdom, with this expression of God, gets implanted in sovereignty. Okay, now there's a lot of, like I said, a really thick pipe of Malchus, of sovereignty, just a little light flowing through the cracks. Okay, this now is something creation can handle, but not really. Actually, not at all. Even this is too intense for creation. And it's very easy to understand why. We are saying, we've said these things many times. You know all these things, but when you actually think about them, you realize it's hard to understand how they make sense. Malchus is a source of creation, right? As I said, Malchus is God's speech. God speaks, and it is. Let there be, and it is. If Malchus is the source of creation, the creation can't exist being by the source. It's too intense. Going back to what we were just talking about, the metaphor of the sun and the rays. We have a sun. We have the rays, but the rays only begin to exist many, many miles away from the sun. I don't know the numbers, so I'm not going to say. I'll just say many. Why? Because the sun is such an orb of fire. I mean, fire is a measly, pathetic term for the sun. Intense, radiating heat, and nothing can exist there. So Malchus, we said, is the source of all of creation, right? Well, really the source of creation is God, 100%. But God constricted himself to will and wisdom. Creation can't handle that. That constriction of God in will and wisdom through Torah mitzvos went into Malchus, and now officially the world can handle it. Creation can be. It's the mother, it's the queen, it's the worlds of revelation, but it's still too intense. Because it's the source. It became now the sun. She's the force of creation. Everything that exists comes from Malchus. This cell phone, going all the way back, is from Malchus of Atzilus. That's the power of creation of everything. And Malach Michal. And higher than Malach Michal. It's all, this is a source. This is the sun. Malchus has now become the sun. Well, guess what? Nothing exists by the sun. Nothing can exist by the sun. It's the source. It's too powerful. So it's the source, which means it's the force of creation, but it's too powerful, so creation can't be. So you got a problem. You got a big problem. The energy has to come from Malchus, but I need a filter for Malchus. I need a filter that will, just as God's will and wisdom had to be invested in Torah mitzvos, and that was still way too intense. So that all had to come into Malchus to be filtered so creation can handle it. Well, I mean, we somewhat solved our problem. We're in a much better state than we were before, but we still haven't solved our problem. Malchus is still too intense. Malchus is so low. Well, so low compared to God's will and wisdom. But compared to all creation, she's the source of creation. She's the sun. So if she's the sun, she's too powerful. So how does creation happen when the source of creation is right there? It's too powerful. So obviously you need a filter, just like will and wisdom, right? God needed a filter. The filter was will and wisdom. Will and wisdom needed a filter. That was Torah mitzvos on that level. But that also needed a filter, so that all descended into Malchus, right? Everything needs a filter. So you have God within will and wisdom, within Torah mitzvos, all packaged in Malchus, and Malchus is the filter. Great! I mean, Malchus is very low compared to will and wisdom, compared to God within will and wisdom. But compared to creation, Malchus is the source. She's the mother. She's the queen. She's the revelation. Rachis is Galos Torah and Soul. She's where the revelation first takes place. So she's the sun. So I'm stuck. She's too powerful because she's the source of creation. She's the sun. The sun cannot give light in such a way. Everything will burn up. So I need a filter for Malchus. My problem is, what can possibly be the filter? Meaning, when I was talking about God within creation, he could find a filter because will and wisdom are so close to him, but much lower than him. So that worked. And will and wisdom, Torah mitzvahs, could find a filter in Malchus because Malchus' sovereignty is so much lower than that. For sure, that's a good filter. Everything's relative. What could Malchus use as a filter? See, the problem is, if the filter is lower than Malchus, which would mean the filter would be creation, because from Malchus flows all of creation, we're back to our original problem. It would burn up. Meaning anything of creation would burn up by the sun. Any ray burns up by the sun. The ray isn't existent by the sun. The sun is too powerful for the ray. So if the sun is Malchus, because at this point she's become a sun, she's a source of creation, and the rays are all of creation, I need a filter, but what filter can I have? Any ray can't be a filter. The rays don't exist by the sun. Meaning no lower dimension than Malchus, all of creation, which is lower dimension than Malchus, could be the filter because it would burn up. That's the problem. The rays don't exist by the sun. Okay, let's go higher. Well, anything higher wouldn't help because the filter by definition needs to obscure, which means it needs to be lower. It needs to be concealing. So if it's higher than Malchus, like let's go back to God's will and wisdom. Let that be the filter. Well, that makes no sense. The will and wisdom is much more powerful than Malchus. So anything lower than Malchus can't be the filter. It would burn up. The rays by the sun don't exist. Anything higher than Malchus, again, we could go back to the source of within Malchus, will and wisdom. Well, that can't be the filter because that's even more powerful than Malchus. We just compounded our problem. So what can be the filter? The Alter Rebbe says, you know what the filter is? The filter is Torah. How is Torah the filter? Well, Torah is powerful enough not to be burnt up by Malchus, meaning Torah is more powerful than the son of Malchus, right? Torah is within the highest levels of God's will and wisdom. So the son of Malchus is not going to burn up Torah. The son of Malchus is like a tiny little star compared to Torah. So no way could it burn up Torah. Okay, so we understand the advantage Torah has over all of creation that flows from Malchus, because anything from creation will get burnt up and Torah won't get burnt up. But then how does it help? If Torah is so high, she's part of God's will and wisdom, which is why she could exist and not get burned up by Malchus, because she's much more powerful than Malchus. Then how is she helping the situation? If I bring in a higher energy as a filter, that makes absolutely no sense. The Rebbe says, but Torah is unique and special. Because Torah, though she starts off much higher than Malchus, so therefore she could filter it because she's more powerful than it, but she descends lower. Torah goes all the way through every single world. There's a Torah in Atzilus, and there's a Torah in Bria, and there's a Torah in Yitzira, and there's a Torah in Asiya, and there's a Torah in Asiya Gashmi. We, human beings with our tiny little brains, we do this amazing thing called learn Torah. And we understand it, and we grasp it. So Torah starts off way higher than Malchus. She's in the highest level of the highest world and way beyond that. But she goes through all the spiritual worlds, and she even goes through the physical world. She descends all the way down, 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 down. So she actually is filtering because she's higher, so she's not get consumed by Malchus's energy, but she's a filter because she's also part of all of creation as well. So her creation can handle. So through her, the light of Malchus, containing the light of God's will and wisdom, which in Torah, can actually now work. And now creation can get the energy. Now we can get the plaster and the concrete and the drywall and the paint. Now creation can happen. I'll say that again just straight, because it's a lot of very deep things that the Rebbe is sharing with us here. Deep secrets of creation. We never wondered about it, but now we're being told the answers to things we never thought about. I'm going to do it like this, and if anyone has any questions. So again, God starts off too intense for all of creation. Within all of creation, too intense for all of creation. Nothing benefits, nothing receives, nothing absorbs. God squashes himself, relatively speaking, to the first space that could perceive him, which is his will and 3 levels of his wisdom. We'll say will and wisdom to be short, the lower level of Kesser and Chacham Bin and Das. In there, God can be revealed. And he is revealed to Kesser and Chacham Bin and Das, to the Torah of that dimension, but way too intense for anything else to handle. And the whole point, of course, is for there to be a creation. So that energy gets invested in Malchus. God, as he is in the will and wisdom, meaning in Torah of these Chacham Bin and Das of Atzilus, is now invested. It's the Shechina within Malchus. And the light of God within the will and wisdom, within Torah of those dimensions, is now filtering through Malchus to create, but it's too powerful because Malchus is a source of creation, so she's going to overwhelm creation. She's the sun herself at this point. So now there's another filter. Now we have a second dimension of Torah over this whole expression, over this entire sun of Malchus, which is Torah. Because Torah is both stronger than Malchus, so she can be the filter and survive, and descends all the way down to physical reality, so she can relate to every level of creation and be a filter for it. And through this filter, the light of God, expressed within will and wisdom of Torah and mitzvahs, expressed within Malchus, expressed within Torah, now that energy can flow and be diffused and be further minimized and give every single aspect of creation the energy it needs to be. And that's the backstory before everything that we've always known and accepted as all the spiritual worlds above and our physical reality as well.